I make comes from the forest. Wabanaki basketry was born in the forest. That feeling and that connection to your environment and to your place goes to the core of who you are and what you're capable of. You know, when I say I speak basketry, that's because I've dedicated my life to weaving. Wabanaki weaving is damn close to Maine's oldest art form. It's one of the languages my tribe speaks, and I am one of the carriers of that language. I am a weaver from the Passamaquoddy Nation. When I say Wabanaki, I'm actually referring to all indigenous people of Maine. We weave with black ash and sweetgrass, which is a grass that grows along the coast. We've been making baskets for thousands of years. And I come from a family of weavers that goes back generations. We have two styles of basketry, fancy baskets and utility baskets. Utility baskets are pretty self-explanatory. That's the original basket. I make what are referred to as fancy baskets. It's a style I developed based on our traditional baskets. Mine are a very contemporary version. They're decorated with curls, braided materials, colors, and a much finer weave. When you see Wabanaki fancy baskets, generally you haven't seen anything like that before. It wasn't until my early 20s that I started weaving. For a time, it was on the brink of being lost, just like many other traditions. I've spent my whole career trying to redefine what ash can be. There's a very small community of weavers that harvest their own material, and you can count them on one hand.
See this dimple right there? It's a disease, and this is quilting.
You can't go into the woods and cut down a tree and make a basket. It's not like that. You have to know where ash grows, what healthy ash looks like. Some ash trees are brittle, some are too thin, some are too thick. Some have branches everywhere, so the grain isn't straight.
This is a core that I took out of an ash tree. That's 20 years of growth.
If the growth rings are thick enough to make baskets with, then I'll gamble and cut it down and see what it looks like. Sometimes I'll be in spaces like museums where they have the white gloves and they're handling the works. And I will give a little chuckle thinking, if you only knew how many times I hit that basket. I think it's amazing that there's that much brutal trauma in something so delicate. My work is heavily influenced by nature. A lot of the shapes that I use come from nature. All of my quill work is images of different animals or places in nature. These pieces do not exist without the Maine forests. There has been times where I've invented something amazing and I've seen it years later in a museum from 100 years ago. It feels like I have this direct connection to my ancestors, like somehow they've told me what can be done. And it's pretty powerful. Everything has changed for Native people, but we still hold on to certain cultural aspects of who we are. So if no one does it, it's just a damn sad loss. This is something that my people made, and it's beautiful.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Serwer, a member of the college's Board of Trustees, class of 1981, and a parent of 2 Bowdoin graduates. And this is Jeremy Frey, who we're delighted to be honoring this weekend. Jeremy, great to see you. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I don't have my, here we go. You probably know now after watching this film about Jeremy, if you didn't know before, about his work, about his career, but it really is remarkable. He's one of the foremost Passamaquoddy craftspeople of his generation, descends from generations of esteemed indigenous basket weavers. And Jeremy was born and raised in the Passamaquoddy Indian Township Reservation in Maine, and learned traditional Wabanaki methods from his mother and apprenticing at the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance. Your creations are woven from natural materials, as we saw, that you forage for yourself, like sweetgrass and wood from the black ash trees, which we'll talk a lot about. And there are subtle forms, there are delicately layered colors, there's elaborate weaves, and it's this really remarkable mixture of tradition and also modern forms, and that to me is what's so striking about your work. The first solo show of Jeremy's work was held in Karma, New York in 2023. And then, of course, you saw about, or I hope you've seen Jeremy Frey's Woven, which debuted in 2024 in the Portland Museum of Art and was recently on view at the Art Institute of Chicago through this past February. And next, and this is the good stuff, Woven will travel to the Bruce Museum in Greenwich, Connecticut, starting when? Like next week, right?
A couple weeks, yeah. It opens on June 4th.
So you can truck on down to the warm weather in Greenwich.
Yeah.
And go see that. But also I should mention that there's Eden 2024, one of your baskets is in the museum right across the way. So if you got anything going on, you're going to hop right over after this talk to go see that.
Right, and that's only here for the weekend, so.
Right, right.
You got to go see it if you want to see it.
Group of exhibitions that included shows at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Baltimore Museum of Art, North Carolina Museum of Art. You are the first 2-time winner of Best of Show at the Heard Museum Indian Guild Fair and Market in Phoenix, Best of Show at Santa Fe Indian Market. And your work is held in the public collections of the Art Institute of Chicago, Denver Art Museum, the Farnsworth here in Rockland, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Portland Museum of Art, the Smithsonian Museum, and our very own, as I mentioned, Boston College Museum of Art. So it's a really remarkable career that's, I guess it's one of those overnight successes, decades in the making.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Or maybe even hundreds of years in the making is the way you could really characterize that, or maybe even longer than that. But I'm curious to start off, Jeremy, how did you become a basket weaver and a basket maker just growing up? I mean, there's other things that young boys might get themselves into.
Well, that's the thing. I did get into all of those things. I grew up on a reservation. We were bored, so we did a lot of things to entertain ourselves. And then I went off into the world, and I became a professional cook.
A cook?
Yeah. And I didn't, cooks weren't getting paid a lot back then. So I went home and kind of started over at my mother's house, and she was relearning the art of weaving from a local elder. And I said, hey, I'll try that out. So I picked it up, and I knew that we had a family history of weaving, and I knew that weaving was a big part of our family history, but I didn't grow up seeing it because it kind of phased out. Like, as my aunts and uncles were teens, they did the same thing I did. We kind of just dropped it. So my mother was relearning it as an adult, and I picked it up, and I sold my first basket. It was a really sad little thing, but what I figured out was in a week of work in my house doing something I enjoyed, I could make just about as much as I was making slaving over the hot stoves. And as a child, I had always done art. I did oil painting, carving, sculpting. I did some metalsmithing. I used to draw games with my brother as a kid. We'd draw these little scenarios back and forth, and the drawings would just keep evolving. And so that was our entertainment. And so it's always been, art's always been something that's in my soul. And when I picked up the basketry, I said, I think I could probably do something more with this than what it is now. And so I just kept doing it. And plus, there was a market for it. So
it's that evolution that I'm really curious about. So you have this tradition of basket weaving and basket making that goes back, as we said, hundreds of years, maybe longer. But it was a tradition that was sort of in one place.
at the time, it was fairly stagnant. I've thought about that over the years. I think part of it was elders getting to a place where their hands couldn't make the work they could make when they were younger, and so when they taught it, they taught a version of the basketry that was less than it had been in their prime, and then those students thought that was the place to be, and so they taught that, and so plus we lost elders that weren't passing on the information, and so when it was coming back, it was through a program through MEBA and Canadian Basket Makers Alliance, and those teachers, they knew what they knew, So we were, and also traditional works hadn't really changed a lot in the past because they were traditional. And so what I wanted to do is really see how far I could take the design and take basketry while still maintaining it being, Native American basketry. Still trying to hold on to the soul of it, but just see what the material could do, because the material is amazing, and it's super flexible, super strong, beautiful color, beautiful scent. I mean, it's just a wonderful material to work with. So that was the impetus of it. I went to my first show ever with a couple of little baskets, and I walked around the entire show, and I looked at every piece there, and I said, all right, if I'm going to sell work, I need to stand out. So what can I do that's different? What can I do that stands out in this market? And then the following year, I brought something different. It might have been the fine weave, which is the little white basket up there. That is up there. No.
We have some slides we're going to show.
Might have been the fine weave, which is my very first innovation was making the weave very, very tiny, which also happened to make the basket stronger, oddly enough. I didn't really think of that as part of it, but and then after that July show that I would attend every year, I try and introduce something no one had ever seen before. So all year I'd have to design something new, and it just became a game of like, well, what can I do that's brand new that no one's ever seen before every single year? And you gotta remember, weaving is just over and under and up and down. It's actually very basic in its nature, and so to make brand new versions of something that's so binary and simple, it's always been a challenge. It's still a challenge.
What year was that when you were at that first show where you sort of had this epiphany?
Maybe 01,
Okay.
02, something like that.
Right. And so what did the elders or the more traditional people on the reservation think when you started to make these shapes and baskets that look very different?
So, I remember I had a new piece. It was actually the fine weave, one of my first ones. I had brought it to a local tribal building. And I was showing it around, a little proud of myself. And one of the elder weavers came up to me and said, why'd you make them so small? It's a waste of time. And I said, well, this is what I want to do. And the first one, the material was too thin. It was flimsy. I mean, it didn't. My mother actually has that one. But it was the concept piece, And years later, that same elder came and bought one of those. Once I'd perfected them, she bought one for a gift for one of her grandkids. So I just had to force through the idea that tradition isn't always stagnant. Tradition changes. You know, everything that we make, everything that we do was once contemporary, and so when you think about what I'm doing as non-traditional, it's not the case at all. It's just part of the tradition is using what's available to you and doing what you need to do to survive. So.
Yeah, I love that idea of tradition and not being static. And
It's ever evolving. There was a time where basketry got stuck in the notion that tradition is exactly what your parents did. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those pieces are beautiful.
I think you can extend that to all kinds of facets of
I think so too.
life. And how long, maybe this is a hard question to answer, but how long does it take to make one of these baskets? And I'm sure it obviously varies, but tell us about that.
12.5
I
hours.
understand. All right, well, that's the if you ask a stupid question. But
No, that's the question. That's the question everyone asks. So you guys would have asked it if we let you. So I've made a basket the fastest basket I ever made was 2 hours.
That's a fast basket.
Well, there was this restaurant, this was a long time ago, there was this restaurant that wanted little baskets for their sugars and whatnot. And so I was like, well, how fast?
There's a diner that has one of your baskets
No.
for sugar?
No, I gave them a rate price and they said no. So, but I whipped one out real quick just to see how quick I could do it. So 2 hours. And that was just a little, salt, pepper, whatever. And then I spent 6 months on a piece, And now it's not including harvest time. Some of the larger pieces, you have to find specific wood. And it can take months to years to find the right tree for the really huge pieces. Either that or you innovate new ways of weaving to use smaller pieces to make bigger baskets, which I ended up doing in the end on that project. But I'll tell you, when you spend 6 months making a basket, and then you go back to a 12-inch basket, oh, man. It's like a month is just like a day.
So you get up every morning and then start weaving?
Yeah, I'm up pretty early. Get the kids on the bus, weave until dinner time. Sometimes if there's a deadline, I weave after dinner time. And I have my own space out of the living area. I used to work in my living room, and there was bee ash everywhere, hanging off the curtain rods, on the back of the couch, in the clean laundry basket. Now I have my own separate area.
Yeah, you have a shop, and do you work by yourself completely, or do you?
No, I have an apprentice right now. He's there a couple hours a day. Generally, I am by myself. But I have an apprentice, Caleb Hoffman. He's pretty good. He's going to go places with it. He also is very helpful. And that gives me, and so working with him, I've realized all the different things that I can actually hand off to someone else that I don't have to do. There are specific things that I need to do to make the baskets what they are. But a lot of the preparation of material, half the time I'm spending, anyone could do. And then the other half is specific to me.
What about the designs, Jeremy? Are you drawing them on paper? Do you have some sort of 3D AI program on your laptop? Are they in your head? How do you conceive and then execute?
Most of it's all in my head. I'm very visual that way. I draw them out for other people to see. Like if I'm trying to describe, I can describe it to anybody, but they're just looking at me like I have 3 heads. So I'm like, okay, hold on. So I draw it out and they get it, you know what I mean? So any of the drawings that I have in my studio are just for other people's benefit. Although sometimes if I have a really crazy idea that I just want to remember, I'll just draw a quick drawing of it because I'm doing 3 other things right now. And it's just a reminder more than it's not really for design. It's just to remind me to do it later.
And where do these ideas come from?
For previous works.
It's just iterating?
Every single basket influences the next. So like, as you work up through what I do, every single piece, whether it's color, minor technical changes, every single time I make a basket, I learn something new, and that will eventually find its way into a new design. And literally every time. Even if it's just the simplest little epiphany, you know. And I don't really realize that until I teach someone else and I start talking about it. Because when you're just doing it, you don't really think, you know. But when you're teaching somebody, you have to verbalize what you know, and you realize that you know more than you thought you knew about this random, weird way of holding the knife even. Like, you just pick up so much over 25 years of doing something over and over again that just becomes second habit, you know.
But the ideas for, you know, you talked about something to put sugar in, or a big thing
Right.
for your laundry or something, but what are the ideas there, the actual physical forms?
So one of the things I've been working with is the use of color, and I found that the point basket, the way that the points lay, the way the curls lay, they from different angles they completely cover the back weave, and from other angles they show you through. And they also have a specific shine to them by the way they're curled. So using that weave, which I've used it so much now just because I'm using it as a palette to play with color. So if you walk by a piece, from one angle it'll look one color, and from the other angle it'll look another color. And as you move by it, it looks iridescent because the color moves across the thing as you walk by. So like if you see photos of those works, you can get a sort of a glimpse at what that would look like because you see all the different angles. But in person, it's a whole different thing. And there's still further I can go with that use of color. It's still pretty fledgling, I think.
When you think about the notion of craft and art and things that were built for utility and they becoming art, so shaker furniture or Chinese vases or even an Egyptian sarcophagus, do you think about when something goes from being a piece made for utility or craft and art? Is that a binary thing? Is that a continuum? And how is that thinking shape what you're trying to do?
I think that all art is a high craft anyway, myself. And so, I mean, you could easily say, and it would be true, that I'm a master craftsman, right?
Right.
But you could also say I'm a contemporary artist. I don't think it matters.
Right.
I mean, when you really break it down, because that was one of the battles early on was craft versus art. It actually influenced a lot of my designs early on, was trying to prove that basketry could be high art. It was a great motivator, a little bit frustrating, but it forced me to explore different ways of envisioning pieces, different ways of creating the work to push to the art form that it is, where I didn't really have to do any of that, if you think about it.
Sort of following up on that a little bit, Jeremy, that there was this notion that indigenous artists who were making crafts were over here, and then other art belonged here, and they were kept separate. And, you know, that was problematic for various reasons, right?
Well, for me, I think, you know, when I went to Santa Fe and I saw all the amazing artists out at Indian Market, there were a lot of, like, I used to enter my work for judging, and most of the people that won were contemporary artists. The traditional works had been seen 1,000 times. They were amazing works, you know, they finished exactly how they're supposed to be, but people had seen them forever, and so they were awarding contemporary work. And I started thinking about, you know, these amazing artists, but they're all in the small markets, and they can't get out of it. And I said, well, why is that, you know? And I think it goes back to that notion of craft, because almost all native arts are harvested from the earth. So they're called craft, but when you see some of the things that people are doing with, you know, moose hair, pottery, silvers.
Jewelry, yeah.
Well, the jewelry's always been pretty high end, but some of the other stuff has come a long way. I mean, some of the beadwork you see out there is high art at this point. It's crazy. I mean, you talk about 6 months on a basket, right? 9 months on a beaded doll that just looks realistic. I mean, it's just getting the audience to understand what they're seeing and to realize, you know, the amount of talent that goes into making those things. I think, and if that's leaving the perception of who natives are out of the equation. Because there was always a perception of, it's like a different people, you know. So they're not, like in American art now, I've seen native art in the American art wings at museums. That's brand new.
Right, that's an interesting point.
Right, it's but it's brand new. So you know, how did that not happen? I mean, how did that even? I don't know. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah.
But there's been progress.
Oh, there's major progress. I mean, just the fact that I'm sitting here is major progress.
So I was down at the Portland Museum of Art and I was actually talking to a docent, and I was telling him that I was seeing you and that you were going to be here. And he said, oh, that exhibit was a smash hit here. It was, you know, probably the most successful exhibit one of the most successful exhibits we ever had at the Portland Museum. Did that surprise you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, but as long as we're talking about it. I think it was the second most successful as far as attendance that the museum's ever done. And that's baskets. That was pretty special. And it did surprise me. Because originally it was a basket show. We didn't know what we're going to find for baskets. I knew the space was huge, and I was like, what are we going to do? I was like, all right, we'll do it. And so it's a winter show, and they're like, all right, we're going to have a winter show with baskets. And then I was like, well, maybe, because we had talked about doing a video as well, and I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to even pull that off either. I mean, I was just early on, I was like, yep, we're doing this. And it just slowly all came together, and you know, we didn't quite meet all the deadlines, but they were there. I delivered the last basket the night before we opened. So I literally put it in, closed it, and people walked in. So, but it came together, you know, and then some other works that were supposed to be in the show, they were designed later, and there's thoughts of maybe putting them into the last leg of the show. Even though they weren't in the original show, they were designed to be in the show, so kind of this whole, but no, you know, between adding, like, I can't remember if it was Jamie mentioned the printers, and she introduced me to a print studio, and then I talked with them a few times. We sent some samples. I liked what they were doing, so I made up a bunch of plates, woven plates, which they go through a press, so you can't weave them the way I would normally weave baskets. They have to be flat. So I had to sort of reinvent how to make a circular basket without any high points, but still have all this pattern. So I wove like 4 or 5 plates, and I went down and stayed with them for a few days. We did a whole series of flat prints and embossments, and those were for the show, and they were very successful as far as I'm concerned. Sort of a bridging between the print and the weave, and that's what Sasura, there's a wall piece that goes in inside the wall, so it has depth, so it looks like a print as you walk up to it, but then you realize it's actually a sculpture that's in the wall.
Yeah, I think we can take a look at that in a minute or two. And was the intention always to have this as a show that was going to go on to other places Chicago?
No, and we had grand. I had grand. I was like, well, we'll send it here and it'll go there. And I didn't even know we were going to get Chicago, but I had grand plans. I always do, though. I think positivity is a good thing. Can you pass me the water?
Sure. Sorry about that. I'll pour it for you. I mean, you consider yourself ambitious that way?
Well, I mean, you just got to plan for I just hope things turn out, and I just work towards it. So anyway, the show started off as a winter show with baskets and a potential video that could or could not be good, who knows. And then, I just kept working towards, and the museum was doing great behind-the-scenes work, finding all these pieces. Photographing for the book. Oh, the book work was crazy. It was back and forth on that.
This is the Rizzoli book?
Yeah. It's amazing what goes in. You walk into a show and you see a curated show and you go, oh, it's pretty. But there's so much that goes into it. Like,
The curation.
it's bigger than you'd think. I mean, they're not just putting stuff on plinths and saying, there you go, call them in. No, there's a lot. And it's, I gained a lot of respect for that through the show. And the book work was amazing. The writing was amazing. The photographers we had to find. Tracking down pieces, have them photographed all over the country. I mean,
That are held by collectors or other museums?
Yeah, because that book, none of those pictures were stock. Those are all, well, some of the article, I mean, some of the, yeah, but the actual photos of the baskets were all for the book.
I want to shift gears a little bit, Jeremy, though, and ask you about the fact that basically all of what you're doing is under threat, though.
Yeah.
I mean, which is just ironic, horrible, tragic, poignant.
Oh, it's...
Maybe you can tell
Yeah,
people
so,
what I'm talking about.
I don't know, some of you may know, some of you may not know. There's an invasive insect that's eating the ash in the country. It's emerald ash borer beetle. And the larva gets inside the bark, and it eats all the under layer. And so then the bark just falls off, and the tree can't get nutrients to the top, and it dies.
And there's no cure for it or whatever, no pesticide or whatever the heck they could do with that, right?
Nope. And it can live inside the little dead, like when the tree starts sprouting, epicormic sprouts, they can live in those. Like even after the forests are dead, it can live in like the remaining little sprouts. So I don't know, it's pretty sad. For me, I've been harvesting extra material so that when I can no longer harvest material, I'll have material left to keep working. I've spent so much of my life doing this, and refining it, it would just be a shame to hit a pinnacle and run out of material. But there's another thing. I'm also investigating different media, which is what the print stuff is about. I'm also toying with the idea of weaving metals, working on some new casting projects of sculpture based on my designs, and other things. I work with some birch bark from time to time, sort of taking a break on that, but I will be incorporating more into my work in the future.
How many of these trees are left? How many have you harvested? How is the clock ticking on this?
I would say I could probably harvest healthy wood for another 10 years. Or more, but it would be spotty within 10 years. After 10 years, I'd be harvesting infected wood that's still usable, but the whole estate would be infected with it anyway.
And are there people working on trying to?
Yeah, but they've been working on it for 20 years.
Right.
It's inevitable that, so I would say the only thing that is positive is eventually without ash, which isn't going to happen because some trees are tolerant.
Some trees are what?
They're tolerant. So the tolerant trees will keep the emerald ash borer alive anyway. So unless the tolerant trees can reproduce on their own and come back, anything you plant is just going to get eaten anyway. But we do have seed banks. So who knows what they can do in the future. I think they're talking about crossbreeding and all kinds of stuff. Because the trees overseas are tolerant to the bug.
Really?
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about, there are no other species that can be substituted really, or they're not?
Not like ash. No. And it's cultural. There's a cultural
You saw that
significance to it.
stripping in the video, right? That's the property?
I
That's
mean,
essential?
it's too much to explain.
We got a minute or two.
It's soft. It's as Teresa would say, it's the silk of the basket weaving trees. It's like
I love that.
It's
the perfect. It's the
it's
best.
like it's only good for baskets, but it's amazing for baskets. Like it sucks as firewood. You can't make furniture out of it. That and cricket. Was it cricket? I don't know.
Lacrosse?
Lacrosse sticks.
Lacrosse
yeah.
sticks.
Yeah, brown ash. That's
Is
it.
that right?
So see you later, lacrosse.
Well, they've substituted. Yeah, that's
Synthetics.
right.
That's what I'm gonna do with baskets.
Yeah.
So it works out.
And by the way, what is sweetgrass?
It's grass that grows on the coast, in the marshes, and it smells sweet. And we braid with it. It's also a medicine. And I use it on all the collars. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone. You're not supposed to sell native medicine, but we sell sweetgrass in all of our baskets. And I was like, I never even thought about it. Oh well, it's too late now. It's been going on for a while anyway.
How much do you communicate and work with other artists, other indigenous artists? I mean, there's Molly Neptune Parker, a famous person who also was a basket weaver in your community. Also recognized by Bowdoin a decade ago. Did you learn from her directly, or ever cross paths with her, or and other people and other parts of the world?
She was on the board of MIBA when I was on the board. So I mean, I've spent some time around her and her family. I sort of took off quick. So any work I did with other weavers was more, I don't know. I did board work, and then I just, as far as learning from, my biggest influences were at the national shows. And it wasn't about what they were doing, it's about the energy in what they were doing. Like seeing these people at the height of their game in their respected field was ridiculously inspiring. And some of them actually were weavers. But as far as locally, I've pretty much taken my inspiration from within. I mean, because I don't know, I just when you're doing things that no one has done, it's like, who do you go to learn those things? You know what I mean? Or has it done in a while? Like I did the fine wave thing, and come to find out, like 10 years later, I was at the Smithsonian. There was an old basket with fine weave in it. So I mean, really, everything's been done before.
Well, I guess
in one
no.
way or another.
Right?
Yeah, well, how old is basketry?
How old?
Since people started using their hands, I'd imagine. And then a lot of that stuff, most of it doesn't exist, so who knows? You know, it's interesting to think about.
We do have some slides, and also we're going to have some time for Q&A, so if you have questions for Jeremy, we will get to those. But why don't we go to these slides, and maybe you can speak to some of the specific baskets that we're going to show.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get that. There's.
So this one here is best. It was my first best in show at Indian Market. That was my only one at Indian Market, but that's the center basket there. It has some urchins and a fine weaves.
Where was that?
Santa Fe.
In Santa Fe, right?
Yeah.
Okay, ready?
And that's me. Just making
A
sure.
younger version?
Yeah. That's a little urchin.
Okay.
Next.
Speaks for itself?
Yeah, it's a little urchin.
Okay.
Okay, this piece was cool. This is in the woven show. The inside is full of color. It's completely dyed, and the outside is raw, the raw pounded surface of the tree. And the idea behind the actual making of this piece was just talking about, you know, like prejudging Native art and then seeing contemporary Native art for what it is on the inside. So it's, and actually I over-dyed on the inside knowing there'd be no color on the outside. But it was very impactful that way, because I usually add some sort of non-dyed material to lighten up the weave. But this one, knowing that it was going to be so rough on the outside, I just darkened it right out. And so outside, none of those weavers are the same size. It's all random sizes. You can see the axe marks on it. It was like your stereotypical like impression of what a native basket would be, and then the inside is like.
Was that inside a glass case?
No, yeah, but not in the photo.
Right,
Yeah.
not the photo.
Most of them were in glass cases.
Next one?
Yeah. That's a fine weave basket. That was one of my first innovations. I love them. I mean, they look simple, but they're hard as a rock. And they're just these solid. I like having the double ring on it because it adds this sense of, like when you hold it, it has this movement and a little ticking noise. I don't know. They're really cool, even in their simplicity. And I deliberately leave them white because of that. It's just all about the craft.
If someone bought that, would your expectation be that they put that on the shelf as a piece of art, or would it be wrong for them to actually use it as a basket?
So if you buy that as an investment, you put it in a box and you never look at it. And it would be a good investment. But if you buy it just to enjoy it, yeah, use it, whatever. Just don't use the ring, because the ring it's held on by small. It's more of a decorative thing. I mean, you can use it, but after like a year or two, you might pop it off there.
Yeah.
So I always tell people the rings are decorative. I mean, they function until they don't, sort of thing.
I think I'd probably put it out where the kids and dogs couldn't get at it.
Oh, I've seen some chewed up ones. It's amazing.
The dogs get at it?
Yeah, they love it.
That's not a good thing.
I don't know if it's a texture thing or what.
These are expensive nowadays, you guys. Oh, that's amazing.
This piece was in my first show in New York. It's the tradition, it's the contemporary, it's the innovation of the fine weave mixed with a very traditional weave. And then also, that weave would normally be set into the basket. This one's built on the surface, so you can see how the green belt is actually raised. It's a belt. On your traditional basket, that would be inside. It would be in the actual weave along with the fine weave. So that was just something I tried. I haven't done that before. I haven't done it since. In many ways, it worked. In other ways, it doesn't work at all.
How does it not work?
I don't want to talk about it. It'll work. No, it'll work. It'll work better than it does in
It's kind of working to me.
Well, I have my favorite pieces, and I have pieces that are just their learning, exploration pieces. But the cool thing is this one is actually on display at the Met right now.
Wow.
So I guess it worked.
And
Enough.
I think more worked than didn't work.
Yeah.
So this didn't.
So again, okay, so when I do a show, I always curate the show myself. So if I'm doing 15 pieces, I look at 14 pieces and I make the 15th piece. That's part of why that exists. Because I wanted something that fit in with the show that didn't necessarily look like the rest of the work.
Right.
And so, and it's interesting, when you do a collection like that, you diversify what you're doing a lot more.
Right.
And so I like that about the piece, actually, is that it was made based on another group of pieces rather than just made out of the blue.
And this doesn't speak to classic Greek or Roman vases in any way?
Not intentionally. I think a lot of my shapes, well, I think if you think about silhouette, like look at the balance. It's like 2/3 of the way up is your widest point, right? And then it's just, a lot of my work is broken up segmentally. And then I just do whatever, whether it's an angle this way or this way. And so I build these different angles together, but they don't.
So there's math in your work?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of math, but it's also what's pleasing, the balance that's pleasing to the eye has always been pleasing to the eye. So that's why it looks like pottery, because pottery has always been pleasing to the eye. It's not, I don't study them, but I think the reason that those worked is the same reason these work.
Symmetry is an ancient thing of mine, right? Next one.
Yeah. So the little brown basket there it's all natural color, and it's a tiny, tiny braided cedar bark mixed with a tiny, tiny braided ash. So if we could zoom in on that, that's one of my favorite baskets, and it's only like 7 inches tall and 4 inches wide.
The real little one?
The little brown one over here.
On the right.
Oh, that little tiny one.
Yeah, then one of them. Okay, just one in.
So the little tiny one was a group of baskets. My mother and I, when we first did shows and we were just trying to make some money, we made like 30 of these little baskets all at once. Like we're just like, it takes you like, you cut all the ribs, do all the bottoms, and then you weave them all up, and you put the decorations on. And they were made to be inexpensive. but it also shows, that's one of my earlier pieces. And it made it into the show, which was kind of cool because I thought those were all gone to the winds. I didn't really keep track of like the really small orders early on. And the 2 center ones are multi-weaves. It's actually a very similar design to the green one with the belt, except instead of a belt, they're multiple tops. But it's all scaffolding. It's all built around an inner basket.
Are there imperfections?
Yeah, all of them. Somewhere.
Ready?
Yeah, that's fine. And that's the show.
That's the show. Okay.
I wanted to have that.
Oops, sorry.
I wanted to have that big circle turn slowly, because if you stare at it, it sort of messes with your eyes. Anyway, I thought turning it slowly would be great, but the museum thought it would cause seizures. So they said, yeah, we can't do that. So we couldn't do it.
Yeah. Nixed by the legal team.
Yeah. Well, because it almost looks like it moves on its own anyway if you stand in front of it. So I just thought, let's have it actually move. Yeah, legal didn't like that.
All right. This one's stunning.
This piece was supposed to be in the show. It ended up going to Paris.
To a museum or a collector?
It's to an organization that does a craft show. Speaking of craft versus art, I entered with that piece to get into their craft prize, and I made the finals, and then so they flew to Paris, and they had a show there with all the finalists, and then they announced the winner. It didn't win, but it got me to Paris, and then I believe they purchased it, so they own it. But I made a replacement for this that was bigger, brighter, and newer. So it's related. It's very similar.
How old is that? When did you make that?
That I would say is 21.
And do you care very much about who owns your pieces? I mean, would it?
I don't necessarily.
I mean, you want good museums.
You want visibility.
Right.
But no, not really. As long as they're taking care of them. Like I've seen old pieces. Like when the show opened, I was amazed at the condition of a lot of those works. I mean, some of them are 20 years old and they've just been taken care of. If you leave them in the light, or if you leave them in the window, you can ruin them in a year, So.
Next one?
Yeah. Well, that's it. Oh, no, it's not it. There's Bowden's basket right there.
Which one?
The black one, tall one.
The black tall one, that's Eden.
That's permanence.
Why is it named that?
Look at it.
Okay.
See? Makes sense, right? If we could zoom in. No, okay, so the idea behind that is that piece sort of, it just has a presence. And it like the bark looks like leather and it's got this black and white. It just has this dominant presence. And so I thought, well, it's, and it's just standing straight with those shoulders and it's permanent.
Bowden Resolute.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one.
Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. This was the Learning Center part of the museum show in Portland. The kids were able to weave some leather over some of my forms, and we had some ash in there. One of my big molds, or a few molds. And then just some quotes, and I think there was a video going on down there too. Yeah, you can see it. But
Are there young people who are taking this up? You have one apprentice, but are there others that are learning to do it?
Well, some of the tribal rec centers and stuff do weaving classes. Some of the schools do. It's at this point, it's I don't know how many new weavers are coming out full time. There was a resurgence for a while. It seems like it's died back a little bit. Urchin basket, again, color, just color, sort of.
But also sticking out, there's a...
Well, this also shows the top's purple, the side's blue, and the bottom's purple. That's just the way that the points lay. It's kind of what I was talking about as you roll around. So if you were to stretch the urchin out taller and give more angles to look at, you'd see that gradually fade a lot more. And it adds kind of a cool look. And if you take those purple points and make them really bright, it makes the piece look like it glows around the edge. it's a bright yellow or a bright green or a bright red. It's kind of a neat effect. This piece is called Caesura. And this is a close-up of it. When you walk by, you can see how it sort of makes a different pattern from this angle.
Okay, so is that three-dimensional or?
Yeah, it's a hole.
Right.
And if you stare at it, well, so the idea for this was that the cover art for the show was very sort of spiral, hallucinogenic. You could see all these different patterns come up with your eyes. So I said, I want to make that three-dimensionally for the show as well. And so that's what I came up with for this. So having it drop into the wall. And it's also framed and glazed, so it looks like a print, but
And that's,
when you get up to it, yeah.
that's part of the show, or who owns that?
I own that.
You own it.
Actually, I think it's going to Institute of Art. I think we're going to donate it to the museum. Just a good spot for it. But I made it for the show. I didn't really. It's impractical as hell. You have to put like a big hole in your wall to mount it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's for.
And it's not double-sided because it'd be cool if you could, have one room sticks out and the other.
There's a lot you could do with that.
It would, yeah, it would be all right. But then it's.
That's wild. Really wild.
It's really cool in person. If we had video of it, it's kind of neat to sail by.
Yeah, that's one that's hard to look at.
We'll go to the next. I like the
you can
second
see
picture
that.
better. You see, there it is.
And how deep is that? How many inches is it?
That's 18 inches deep.
Really?
And it's a few feet wide. So that's really big as well. I ended up making a basket based on that later on. And it was such a small base that I had a stone made that was the exact same size as the form, so that it would have a weight. So I wove the weight into it, and then I wove up over, so that it would sit on, the stone would hold the base, because it was so top heavy that it worked, I think.
How long did you work on that one?
That one was off and on. I had to do a lot. I made underneath the, if you want to go back, underneath the mat on that, there's actually a birch bark mat that's all stitched. So there's a really cool mat under that white mat. But the powers that be felt that it was a little too crafty looking. So we covered it up. But whoever gets it could always take it off. It's cool. It has those browns.
It's a secret, like one of those old masters with something behind it.
You guys don't even know.
Yeah, right.
It's cool. I got pictures.
That's great.
I like them both. I think they both have their own. And that's just my messy studio. My grandfather's basket in the middle on the bottom. And there's the form for the Caesura. That little cone. And that big basket upside down there.
Yeah.
It still looks like that. It's just sitting there. It's like a piece of furniture at this point.
What is it going to be?
A piece of furniture. It's one of those things. It's like when you try innovations, a lot of times they don't work. And this was a hybrid between a utility basket and a fancy basket. So I did these thick ribs, and then the smaller weave, and it just. I could finish it, but it wouldn't be up to the standard I would want, and I just wouldn't want to put it out in the world. So it just sits there. It looks cool in pictures. It's like. Plus, at this point, it's been there for years, so it's starting to actually discolor because of the light from the window.
Well, someday, maybe if you finish it, you'll say, this one took me 15 years to
me too. Yeah, you can, I don't know.
What's going on here?
So this was the printing studio. These are all hand crank presses. And this was just laying out where they were going to be on the paper. And then they get inked. And well, actually, this was doing embossments. That's why they're not inked. So we did some just embossed paper first. Because once you ink them, they're inked. So.
Next one.
Yep. And that's one of the pieces inked.
And this is.
But if you look at the ribbing,
Yeah.
you can see the grain in some of the.
Right.
In some of the wood, where if you dye it purple or wouldn't see that. It's just a solid color. So it kind of is an interesting way of looking at it.
Beautiful.
And that little orange one, I did some single prints, and I did just that orange one on a piece of paper, and I just love it. It's just the chaos of it, the random chaos. It just, I don't know.
Yeah. Galaxies, something like that.
Well, that's not my favorite version of the prints either. I like some of the more singular ones. Like, if you go to the next one, like those are cool. So the one's gold and the one's silver. But it was one thing, so to print it gold, I had to print over silver. So you can see the silver mixed in with it, which I think works. Sort of gives it an antique look.
How big are those?
Those are large. They're like
2 feet by
2 by 3 maybe. Close to it. They're big. Or, I don't know. Yeah, they're large. And it was a large weave because it's 1-to-1. And then this is a perfect example of what the points can do with color. Like in person, the silhouette of that looks red. There is no other color. And then as you look towards the center, you get the blue. But what you don't notice is behind the red, there's brown. And behind that, there's gray. So there's a lot of color in that piece, all just working together to make this really cool effect. And that's the last slide, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
It is.
And that one's at the Baltimore Museum of Art, if you ever want to go see it.
This one.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we have just maybe a minute or a few minutes left for questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have down here, we have a mic coming to you in 1 second. So come on down and give this person the mic. It's a long walk down.
The colors that you have, and I'm guessing that they're all from plants or something, how you make the dyes.
I use synthetic aniline
Do you?
dyes, yeah. That's the only thing I don't harvest.
They're beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? We've got one over on this side. And then over here, yeah. Maybe you can cross over. I don't know where. Thank you.
In the Portland show, there was a wonderful video, which was really just part of the marvel of the exhibition. And we watched you choose the tree and make the basket. People were just so enthralled. And then you burned the basket.
Oh, that video.
And you could just hear the groans, as you've already heard them here. Can you talk to us about what that meant? Because each person had a different version of the significance of that.
Right.
So, as a basket maker who is not classically educated in art, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand what art is. And one of my layman definitions for art is that it's an emotional reaction to something you see. And the artist, the painter, whoever, they're not there to give you that reaction. You get it from what you see. And so if I can invest you in a show and then show you how that show is made and then burn it in front of your eyes, you're going to have an emotional response. And then you walk back through the show and see the entire show completely differently. So the video was made for you to experience your own version of whether it's the loss of family, the loss of time, the loss of culture. It's just about investing heavily in something and losing it without any control, you know? And it's not, I have my own reasons for it, but by telling you, it would diminish your own experience of the work. So that's what the video's about.
We have another one here after.
I was quickly going to ask another thing. I know that you taught at Haystack, and I think Jamie was in the class. Is that right? No. And a friend of mine said that you are an absolutely extraordinary teacher. And I wonder if you're going to be doing more teaching within that construct of something like Haystack.
Not at this time. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but not at this time. And we had a fun time in the class. It was fun. Lots of jokes.
I think we have time for another question or two.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead while you go there. Yes.
Thanks. I have 2 ash trees in my backyard. The bark is just beginning to split. Is it too late for you to use those trees?
Are they infected? Is it brown ash?
I thought it was black, but I don't know.
Or black ash? They're the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
No, they have to be processed there. You wouldn't move them.
You're welcome to
Where
Portland.
are you?
Portland.
Portland?
Yeah.
And you know they're brown? It's a long drive.
Pretty sure I can find out. Call you.
You should. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to write some stuff down.
Okay.
I'd
thank
love
you.
to see photos.
You can do it like a Go Tree Me campaign.
Yeah.
Right?
We'll have to have an ash pounding seminar and get everybody pounding locally.
Your question?
I have a question about your forms.
Mm-hmm.
Do you turn them yourself?
Yes. Yeah.
And what are those made out of?
Huh?
Are they made out of ash as well?
No, so she's asking, because I can't hear you. She's asking if I turn my own forms and if they're made out of ash. They're made of popple, kiln-dried popple, and I laminate together to get as big as I need to, and then I have a massive lathe. And I turn them down, and then I cut them into a puzzle shape so that they can come out of the top. The ideal wood would be basswood, but that's it's a lot more expensive, and they both serve the same function. But I didn't really get to express myself artistically the way I can until I started making my own forms. I think it's important, unless you're doing traditional works, which you'd work off traditional forms.
One last question maybe, and then I think we're going to have to call it.
Do you design your baskets on paper or something ahead of time? And then a second question, how many layers of wood can you strip from a log?
So I do design the pieces ahead of time to an extent. I do let them speak to me as I go. Sometimes I'll change a weave color pattern or things like that. And as far as logs, it depends on how fast they grew. If they grow slower, then the rings are thinner. And if they're thinner, you can take more material off. If they're really, I've pounded a tree and gotten 7 years off, and I've pounded a tree and gotten 20 years off. It just depends on how fast they grew and how thick that growth is. And then also moisture content matters. So it varies. I mean, most of these questions are going to vary. Like how long did it take to make a basket? It could be 3 hours, it could be 3 months. It's the same with the rings. It depends on the tree.
All right, I think we're going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry, maybe you can grab Jeremy. He's around on campus. But please join me in thanking Jeremy Frey. Thank you. Thank you. Now go to the museum and see that.
And thanks for staying till the end.